All right, so the General Assembly in Frankfurt just wrapped up the legislative session this week. So we officially have a budget for the next biennium, and then we also have a significant one-time spending bill, which was House Bill 900 this year. When you look at that bill specifically, you can see where the state of Kentucky is focused on infrastructure, speed to market, and we're going to dive into that right now. So the state's continuing to choose to invest heavily into getting sites shovel ready, like many other states have been for the last several years, but it's been a primary focus for Kentucky now for several years. They put another $40 million into what they're calling their megasite fund. That's to be able to provide funding to 500 plus acre sites across the state to help get projects done. You've heard us talk a lot about KPDI. They put another $50 million into that bucket to help communities to apply for funding, to build out infrastructure, to buy sites, to continue to get themselves shovel ready for companies when they come to town. They also put another $50 million into the grant program. The grant program itself is allowing communities to match federal funding to get projects over the finish line. So the thing to think about here is that this is what we call infrastructure money. This is allowing the communities and the states to reinvest into themselves, so that way before a company even shows up, before they ask a question, they have the answers because they've invested early on. And then let's also talk about what's maybe the boring stuff to some of us, right? The state also put in $45 million for water and wastewater infrastructure, specifically for rural communities across the state. And this is essential to people who live, work, eat, play, raise families in these communities. They put $75 million into transportation funds. Think about rail infrastructure, roadways, highways. So these aren't the flashy announcements that we see every single day in the newspaper, but they are absolutely essential to every single day of life, not only for the economic development projects that we talk about every single day, but for quality of life for the citizens across the state of Kentucky. All right, so on to housing, something that we talked a lot about here at MWM. You can't talk about economic development without talking about housing. What the General Assembly ended up approving wasn't to the scale that the Housing Task Force recommended, but it was something. They approved a revolving loan fund for infrastructure improvements on housing projects, and they also continued to invest in affordable housing. Again, not to the large scale that we were expecting, but it's certainly something to pay attention to. So what does this mean? If you're a community, these funds are now available, they're competitive, and if you're not applying, somebody else in the region is. This budget tells us what the state's prioritizing right now, and simply put, they're prioritizing speed to market. So if you're working through how this applies to your community or a project right now, that's exactly what we're spending our time on.